Hey, good afternoon to you. 4:06 now. News Talk 105.9 WMAL, where we're making sense of the news. Coming up, Philip Wegmann joins us from Real Clear Politics at 4:30. We'll talk to him about the Iowa caucuses this evening. It's the first big one of 2024. And then Keith Kellogg, the general, will be with us at 5 o'clock tonight. We'll talk to him about the left's coup that they're planning in the open. Get his thoughts on whether or not subverting the United States military and the President of the United States is a good idea. I think I know his answer. We'll ask. You can join us at 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL. Like I said, a lot to get to. We've been talking about Fanni Willis, the Fulton County prosecutor, who is, she's the district attorney there, who's been going after Donald Trump. She alleges that he's been involved in a RICO case, a racketeering operation. But it looks like those very same charges could be turned against her, given that she and her boyfriend have collected upwards of $1 million now over the last 2 years and gone on a lot of fancy trips during that time frame. She says the people who are noticing and attacking her for it are racist. That's what she said from the pulpit of a church this weekend. For more on this, I want to bring in Will Scharf. He's a former federal prosecutor. He's a candidate for attorney general in Missouri, and he also has served on President Trump's legal team at times. Will, good to have you with us, sir. Thank you very much.
Great to be with you. Thanks so much for having me on.
This is a wild saga. How perilous is this for Fanni Willis?
Yeah, President Trump said it last week, and I think he's absolutely right. Fanni Willis is probably in more legal jeopardy than any of the defendants in this case that she's brought at this point. It's a really, really crazy story, and it speaks to serious misuse of public funds, obviously serious personal failings on her part. I think this whole prosecution is in danger of just falling apart. And it's really down to these really inappropriate actions that she and the special prosecutor appear to have taken.
Yeah, Nathan Wade, who's being paid $250 per hour in the gig. She claimed this weekend that she hired 3 special prosecutors. She paid them all the same rate, and only one of them is a black man, Nathan Wade, so therefore he's receiving the scrutiny. That was her claim. She is alleging that this was racism. What she didn't reveal was something that came out today. It turns out she's actually been paying the RICO expert that she hired, John Floyd, $150 an hour. She wasn't paying him the same rate at all. She's paying her boyfriend a lot more money, Will.
Yeah, I think it's worth backing up a second. So last week, Mike Roman, who's one of President Trump's co-defendants in this Georgia case, filed a motion that really brought this all to light for the first time. And what Roman alleges is that Fanni Willis inappropriately appointed this special prosecutor, Nathan Wade, didn't follow the normal processes for seeking approval for the appointment of a special prosecutor. She then has paid him over the course of this case over $1 million. And then some of that money he has spent on this illicit affair with her, that he's a married man. He's actually currently going through a divorce. And while he's been married, he's been taking her on vacations to the Napa Valley, on cruises, on vacation to the Caribbean. He's been lavishing her with gifts. And it raises a very serious question of whether Fanni Willis's actions here essentially converted public funds, in this case, actually federal COVID relief funds, for her own purposes. Mm-hmm. I think there's a very real possibility that this could be a federal crime, federal bribery, federal honest services fraud. These are very, very serious accusations, and it's only really coming to light because of this divorce case that Nathan Wade, her special prosecutor, is involved in.
Right, and Mike Roman's filing also indicated that the two may actually be living together as well, so that money could be going to pay for their living expenses.
It speaks very carefully about that. It says they've been cohabiting at a location that is neither of their residence. So that could mean a hotel room, that could mean a secret apartment. This is all sort of soap opera stuff, but just remember where we started. When this indictment was rolled out, the mainstream media breathlessly reported it as this ironclad legal argument that was finally going to get Trump. And again, sitting here today, I think Fanni Willis is in much more legal jeopardy than President Trump or any of his co-defendants are. It's just a crazy turn of events.
Now, I'm not alleging that, I'm not even suggesting, Will, that you would ever commit a crime. But if you were to plan one out, why would you commit it as a part of the highest profile legal case in the country? Like, why would she use the money that is supposed to be going towards the prosecution of the former president of the United States and then give her boyfriend $1 million? Doesn't that's brazen?
If this were the plot of a movie, the movie would be rejected because it's too unbelievable. She took COVID relief funds, inappropriately hired a special prosecutor who was her affair partner, spent some of that money on lavish vacations, and all the while claimed the moral high ground and sort of thumped her chest, claimed that this was so important for the future of the republic that she go out and get Trump. I mean, it's a crazy story, and it really speaks to the depths that the left is willing to sink to if it serves their broader purpose of election interference here. But again, I mean, I think Fanni Willis has made a ton of mistakes here. Yep. Some of those mistakes are going to have very real legal consequences for both her and for her bogus special prosecutor, Nathan Wade.
Also, I still don't actually fundamentally understand why she's charging Trump at all. I mean, I understand it from the perspective of this is election interference, but the idea that they can even suggest that Donald Trump is guilty of racketeering because he was objecting to the way the election was conducted, how does that even begin to make sense?
Yeah, it really doesn't. It's the same with the ongoing D.C. federal prosecution against President Trump. President Trump had real questions about election irregularities in 2020. He set out to investigate those irregularities, and somehow they're now trying to say that those constituted criminal acts. I think what this prosecution is an effort at election interference stage managed by the Biden administration. It's worth noting that Nathan Wade spent 8 hours that he billed the state of Georgia for, in the White House counsel's office in November of 2022, on the very same day that Jack Smith, the special counsel, was appointed. So you have this series of events that seem to indicate that Georgia, Fanni Willis's office in Georgia, were coordinating with the White House counsel's office to bring these bogus prosecutions. And I think the only reason for that is what we all know the real reason is here, which is election interference, making sure that President Trump is tied down with legal matters so that he can't campaign as effectively as he otherwise would be able to.
Well, I don't know. I mean, maybe the White House allows for 8 hours of water cooler conversation with the White House counsel's office. Maybe he was just stopping in. Has that been your experience? The White House counsel's office normally can allot 8 hours for just hanging out?
That's not normally the way things work over there, but this is a highly irregular White House counsel's office. You had another guy, Colangelo, who worked with Tish James in New York in her AG's office, then showed up in the White House counsel's office, then seems to have been detailed out to Alvin Bragg, the New York DA who indicted President Trump on totally made-up business records charges. So you seem to have this White House counsel's office serving as a nerve center, this campaign of lawfare against President Trump. And it's just wildly inappropriate for federal employees, for taxpayer-funded employees, to be engaged in this sort of political activity.
Well, additionally, you had an aide for Jack Smith as well, who met with the White House before those charges were dropped on Trump. The New York Post reported at the time that Biden staffers did meet with special counsel Jack Smith's aides before the Trump indictment. So you're right. The White House has very much been the epicenter of all of these attacks on Trump across the country.
100%. I think the more that we find out about all of these prosecutions, the dirtier the whole process seems. And I just hope that the people responsible are held accountable. It seems like maybe Fanni Willis's day of reckoning is coming.
Yeah. Well, also another piece here is Nathan Wade also met with the House January 6th Select Committee as well, because so this is in addition to the White House. You've also got the J6 committee, which is, Nancy Pelosi special designed to hurt Trump and his supporters. You have Nathan Wade coordinating with Congress as well.
Well, in the January 6th committee, it's incredible what they did. They put together this selectively edited report. They then peddled it all over the country to people like Nathan Wade, to people like the folks out in Colorado who brought this effort to kick Trump off the ballot. And then they shredded all their files so that on the back end, nobody can look at the full body of evidence that they assembled and form their own conclusions. unlike, for example, the 9/11 Commission or the Baker-Carter Commissions on elections after 2004, the January 6th committee was not an effort to discover the truth. It was ultimately just an effort to blame Trump. And that's not the way those sorts of investigations are supposed to occur. It's not the way they've ever occurred in the past. It really speaks to the irregularity of this campaign of lawyer that's being waged against the president.
So we began, Will Scharf, with our conversation on just Fanni Willis and how it appears she is in greater legal jeopardy right now than any of the people that she's prosecuting. But if we were to connect all of these dots, which of course we have over this conversation, all of these various Democrat prosecutors across the country constantly meeting with top Democrats officials at the White House and Benny Thompson, for instance, on the J6 committee, this is beginning to look to me like a criminal organization. I mean, to what extent can we say that this would be the kind of thing that would fall into the RICO law area rather than what Donald Trump has done?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if it's a RICO conspiracy specifically, but it certainly smells pretty dirty to me. Yeah. And Alvin Bragg's prosecution is now falling apart over the fact that they're relying on Michael Cohen's testimony, a serial perjurer who's gotten himself into legal trouble recently. And just up and down the line, these prosecutions are falling apart. I used to be a federal prosecutor. We were trained that prosecutions are never supposed to be political. They're never even supposed to look political. These cases against President Trump, that core principle just seems to have been thrown away. And I think all of these folks are going to end up in a lot of trouble just because of how badly they've behaved and how many rules they've run roughshod over here.
There's a bunch of things happening. One of them is Alvin Bragg's case is, of course, cartoonish, and so I think Trump will prevail on that one. But then you've got this Fanni Willis case, which seems to be collapsing under the weight of her own corruption. And then the Jack Smith case, even the charges against Trump related to January 6th, a lot of it seems in peril right now because the Supreme Court is about to hear a case involving whether or not any of these J6 suspects even disrupted a congressional hearing, if they violated a law that was designed to prevent white-collar criminals from defrauding Congress. Is it your view that the legal picture has gotten a lot better for Donald Trump lately?
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. The case that you're speaking about is the Fisher case, which the Supreme Court took up. We're expecting a ruling on that by June. What basically happened there is that a bunch of January 6th defendants, hundreds of them, were charged under Section 1512C2, which is a subsection of the Federal Criminal Code that was enacted after, as part of the Sarbanes-Oxley Act. This is sort of in the aftermath of Enron. And the idea was to penalize certain acts that interfered with congressional investigations, evidence shredding, that sort of thing. What they've done is they've applied that to January 6th protesters, saying that they obstructed an official proceeding, namely the electoral count process, and therefore what would otherwise be relatively minor misdemeanors, parading, entering a building unlawfully, that sort of thing, should instead be prosecuted as felony offenses. Now, I think the Supreme Court is going to strike down that legal theory. I think it's just a bad theory. It's not well-founded. It doesn't accord with the text and structure of the statute at issue. Yeah. Significantly, 2 of the 4 charges against President Trump in this D.C. prosecution brought by Jack Smith use the same statute and the same theory. They're 1512C2 prosecutions. If those charges fall away, I mean, that's half the case right there. In addition to the other issues that we've raised in court, like presidential immunity, that I think should in and of themselves result in the dismissal of that case. Right,
and we're awaiting oral arguments in the Supreme Court very soon on Donald Trump being removed from the ballot in Colorado and Maine. So there's a lot of things moving very quickly, and again, I think to Trump's benefit here.
Yeah, the Colorado case should be a 9-0 opinion. I think the law is totally open and shut. The Supreme Court's hearing arguments on February 9th, but I expect we'll have finality on that issue of ballot access in relatively short order. It would be great to see the liberal justices vote with the law on that one. I think it's so clear-cut that it should be a 9-0 opinion. There's no grounds to keep President Trump off the ballot. This insurrection argument is just total garbage. Most legal commentators, even on the left, have said that publicly at this point. Yeah. So I'm hopeful, but Yeah, to get to your previous point, I think the legal picture is looking much better for President Trump now than it has before. I think in the weeks and months ahead, it's going to look even better.
Amazing. It's just amazing. Will Scharf, again, former federal prosecutor, candidate for Attorney General of Missouri. Thank you, sir, for your time today and your wisdom. Really appreciate that. All right, let's check in on Sam calling in from Alexandria. Sam, good afternoon. You're on the Vince Colonnese Show.
Hey, thanks, Vince, and happy Martin Luther King Day to you on this
Likewise, thanks,
nice
sir.
and quasi-snowy day.
Yeah.
You know, listening to your guest and your conversation, the one thing that kind of struck me is, you know, not until professionals and people hold each other accountable will anything change. You know, with respect to these attorneys that are going after Trump, particularly the one in Atlanta with the story that you were discussing, is what state bar could, within their right mind, say, you know what, yeah, we're proud of this attorney. And that should be a standard, you know, that they are practicing their art, their profession at the highest of level. And if this individual doesn't get disbarred for this obvious egregious act, to me, I just don't get it. And to go into a church on, I think it was Martin Luther King Day or yesterday.
It was yesterday, yeah.
And lay this on the floor as racism. You know, I can't speak for African Americans, but I think if I was in that church, I'd have to say, hold on, we know what true racism is, and that you're doing the nasty with the guy in your office and paying him a lot of money.
Yep.
That ain't racism, girlfriend. That's wrong, period. And you discredit the memory of Martin Luther King and all those that have suffered true racism through throwing that out like that. And, you know, that and that's where it has to end, is that people just get so outraged. They say, no, that is unacceptable within our race, within our gender, within our profession,
within our country. I mean, Sam, it's about dignity, isn't it? It's about dignity as a person, you know, not lying, not standing up there and using your race as a shield while you are actually committing sins that you deserve to be held accountable for, not invoking God, not standing up there and saying that you're being attacked because of your faith. It's also ridiculous. And additionally, you know, if you're going to be a public servant, if you're going to be a person who actually works as a prosecutor on behalf of the people, you will be held. You should be held to a standard. You're using their money and you're supposed to be defending their communities. And instead, you're cashing in for yourself and you're lying. So you have failed as an attorney, as a public official, and as a person. And you should be looking for a course correction. It is worth being in church, but you might be on the wrong side of the pulpit.
Absolutely. You couldn't have put it any better. Thank you so much, Vincent.
Thanks, Sam. Well, good afternoon to you. It is 4:37 here. News Talk 105.9 WMAL, where we're making sense of the news. Coming up on the program, 5 o'clock, we'll talk to General Keith Kellogg about how the left is openly planning a coup against a future president, Donald Trump. We'll ask the general what he thinks of that. And you can join us at 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL. It is the Iowa caucuses today. Those are happening this evening all across the state of Iowa, where Iowans will make a decision on who they'd like to see become the Republican nominee. It's fascinating watching these final events in Iowa. Among them was this endorsement yesterday from a presidential candidate who you probably won't remember just by hearing his voice.
I was speaking on behalf of President Trump at the Iowa caucuses in Sioux City. And today I'm here to do something that none of the other presidential primary candidates have done. And that's endorse Donald J. Trump for the President of the United States of America.
Quick, who was that? Anybody know? If you said Doug Burgum, you nailed it. That's right. Donald Trump got a healthy dose of Burgumentum yesterday. Doug Burgum has endorsed Donald Trump. That was nice of him. Donald Trump was standing alongside him as he received his endorsement. But maybe that's what it'll take, because it looks like Donald Trump is now, thanks to Doug Burgum, going to win this thing in a landslide. We'll see. Here to talk about what's happening with the Iowa caucuses, Philip Wegmann is here. He's a Real Clear Politics White House correspondent and joins us on the phone. Hello, Philip.
Hey, Vince, I'm not sure who that endorsement helps more, the former president or the good governor.
That's right. Doug Burgum. I was chuckling. I saw the Burgum endorsement yesterday. I was like, this is the best. I love this. And Donald Trump he's so sweet about it. He's actually standing there on stage with him. He actually he accepted it gracefully.
He is, yeah. Yeah,
Hey,
I
so-
remember.
Yeah.
I remember there were some folks who were of the opinion that Doug Burgum had some good moments during those early debates. And certainly he was good to his political consultants. He was good to the folks who got, I think it was gift cards that the governor was giving out in order to help him qualify for some of the early contests.
Mm-hmm.
But how quickly things change.
I know they have changed. Now the question is, like, are the Iowa caucuses meaningful? And I guess the answer for this year, I'm talking. I guess we'll get the answer tonight as we see who people vote for. But it seems that for a lot of people that this is not really even a primary. It's almost as if Donald Trump is still an incumbent president at this moment, based on the lead he has in these polls.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, nationally, Trump is up by more than 50 points in the national Real Clear Politics average. He's at 61, and that is mirrored in the states. In Iowa, he's up 52.5 to Haley's 18.8 and DeSantis's 15.7. What do all those numbers mean? It means that he's got a landslide, and the big question tonight is going to be, does he finish above 50%? Because if Trump finishes above 50% in Iowa, then it's going to be really difficult for Haley or DeSantis to make this rear guard argument, which is, oh, if only the other person would get out of the race, then with their support cobbled together, this thing could really be a contest. But, if Trump dominates tonight, if we're talking about a win of 50 points, it makes it pretty difficult for any of the other rivals to stay in the race, let alone have a meaningful contest here.
We just saw Chris Christie drop out of the race last week, with the recognition that he wasn't making any further headway. He thinks that Nikki Haley is going to be smoked in this race, that she's not going to prevail. He said it on a hot mic that his own campaign had set up. But what happens? Do you think if Trump wins by that big margin, are you predicting any of these candidates will drop out as early as tomorrow?
Yeah, I'm not in the prediction business, but it seems that these candidates will have to take a good, long, hard look in the mirror. I was with Governor DeSantis a few days before Christmas, and it's no secret that he has made the Hawkeye State his last Alamo. He relocated his campaign there. The super PAC that is supporting him has gone all in on the state, and we've been hearing about how they built this juggernaut, this get out the vote operation that's really going to have folks caucus, and maybe with the snow there, we will see some true DeSantis diehards really rally to the governor. But I think that absolutely everything would change if he was to win in Iowa. I don't think that is likely. I think at this point, the DeSantis campaign, they're hoping for a strong second. And if he's unable to pull that off, then the question is, where could he go to compete meaningfully? Yeah. He's not doing well in New Hampshire. Even Chris Christie, who has dropped out of the race at this point, is doing better than the Florida governor in New Hampshire. And South Carolina, well, that's Nikki Haley's backyard. She, in theory, on paper, could have a built-in advantage there. So it would be difficult to see his path if he does not have a solid showing in Iowa. But for the first time in a long time, we're finally going to see some results. There are finally going to be some points on the board, assuming the Iowa GOP doesn't do what the Iowa DNC did, which is fail to report results in a timely manner like they did in 2020.
Yeah, and you're right. Different parties, and the Republicans at least have been pretty reliable at reporting those results. South Carolina, I just pulled up the numbers to double check, and sure enough, Donald Trump is way ahead of Haley there too. He's got more than twice the support she has in her own state. So it really is in so many ways Trump's race to lose, and it's hard to see how.
Mm-hmm. And I think that if you look at Trump, the moment that changed things was the indictments. Before that there was this expectation that maybe DeSantis could answer in a positive and winsome manner the question of Trumpism without Trump. What we've seen, however, is that even though he has all of the quote unquote right answers when it comes to policy, I mean, no one's going to get to the right of him on policy. That's not what the Republican base wants in their champion. And going back to that first indictment, I remember being on the phone with John McLaughlin, Trump's pollster, and he said, this is really helping us in the short term. And there has been sort of a rally to the flag moment where all of Trump's supporters have seen him under attack. They have seen supporting him as the best way to stick it to their enemies in the government, in the media, so on and so forth. And they've rallied to him. And so Trump, he has the advantages of incumbency, but he's also the leader of this sort of cultural grassroots movement, and that is really propelling him in the primary. The question is, what hurts him what helps him in a primary? Does that end up hurting him? Do the indictments, create a drag in a general election? Well, Haley and DeSantis are making that argument, but it's not winning points.
But see, I'm convinced that was in many ways the reason the left launched so many of these indictments against Trump in the first place, from all across the country, all at the same time, all leading up into the election, was to both bolster him in a primary with the recognition that attacks on Trump would elevate him, and to hurt him in a general election. That was the thinking anyway. We'll see if it actually comes to fruition. But in my view, that is a pretty explicit form of election meddling. And what's been interesting about the indictments, though, is that it's kept Trump away from Iowa. Trump has not been able to go to Iowa as much as his opponents have in the primary. And normally, Philip Wegmann, is my impression that it's the people who show up the most, who do the most town halls, who spend the most time among Iowans, who tend to do better in the Iowa caucuses. Looks like it may not be the case this year.
Yeah, once again, the unconventional candidate seems to be succeeding by being unconventional. He certainly is splitting his time between the courtroom and the campaign trail, and that's not hurting him with Republican voters. I know that you mentioned that this could be part of the plan, for the former president's opponents to come after him and bolster him in the primary. Certainly, President Biden's rhetoric about January 6th, about reveling in that day and talking about how so bad for democracy, that continues to keep the past in recent memory, and clearly, that elevates his former opponent. But I've got to tell you, I have talked to longtime friends of the current president, people who were close to him, and they definitely want the rematch. They want 2024 to look like 2020 because they think that they have a playbook for beating Trump, and they want to run it again.
Well, yeah, that makes sense to me. Considering everything they did to make that happen. A version of their plans include this effort to try and remove Trump from ballots in places like Colorado and Maine. It's getting to the point that even the ballot rigging itself is fairly explicit. If you're removing the candidate entirely from the ballot, I'm not sure what else you could call it, Philip Wegmann.
Yeah, and that's something that I think that Trump's core supporters are following very closely. They are ready to have these debates about whether or not he can or can't be removed from a ballot. Right. But I think that, some of these moderates and some of these independents come November of this year, they might not have been following this as closely. And maybe the unconventional candidate who, barrels his way through the Republican primary can find that the American electorate doesn't want to, change history too much by voting for a convicted president. We'll see.
Meanwhile, the Democrats are not doing their election, their primary the same way. First of all, they're barely even having a primary. They're trying to stop primary opponents from appearing on ballots. And they've been tussling with New Hampshire about its status as the first primary in the nation, preferring South Carolina. It's a lot more chaotic, I think, than people realize, Philip.
Yeah, I think that we would be focusing a lot more on this party fight if it wasn't a given that Biden was going to be the nominee. There would be a lot more frustration over this. Clearly, it is sort of a coronation for the current president. I don't buy in, and I don't see anything that would suggest otherwise. But this is going to have long-term effects, moving the first Democratic primary to South Carolina. You're going to make angry a lot of folks in New Hampshire and Iowa, but that's the way that Biden wants to play this game, and it's certainly to his advantage. But come 2028, I think that the mild back and forth between some of these state parties is going to turn into an all-out slugfest. Because there are a lot of advantages to going first. Certainly, one of the reasons why Iowa likes going early is because there's often an unexpected result. It bolsters them, and frankly, the agricultural barons there. This is a good opportunity for them to really hold the feet of these candidates to the fire on questions like ethanol and biofuels.
Yes.
Iowa would lose that if they're no longer the first in the nation caucus.
Well, also, it brings a lot of money into these states, too. Presidential campaigns spending millions of dollars on advertising that gets turned into tax revenue. That's a huge deal, and these states are going to be very upset, of course. You're already seeing it happen among Iowa and New Hampshire Democrats, that things are being rearranged on them by the National Party to protect, really to protect what it is that the Obama-Biden world has in mind for how Democrat politics should be run. It's wild. Anyway, Philip Wegmann, keep on being a great reporter over at the White House, and I really appreciate your time as always, sir. Thank you very much. All right, speaking of the Iowa caucuses, the Republican primary, the pollster Frank Luntz, who you will sometimes see on television doing those focus groups, or at least did. I don't know if he does those anymore, but doing those focus groups where he surveys a room reacting to a live event like a debate or some sort of interview. Here he is. He had a falling out with Trump a while ago, and he didn't think that Trump had any means to come back or to succeed or prevail in this field. And sure enough, of course, Trump is succeeding. And here's Frank Luntz. This is a remarkable piece of audio. And Luntz, he looks very dour. He doesn't look that thrilled about the assessment he's giving. But somebody asks him, hey, if you were to place a bet on who's going to win in November, who would you put the money on?
If you had to bet $150,000 on who's going to win in November, who would you bet on?
I never dreamed that I would say this, but I would bet on Trump. I thought it was done. I thought it was over. You don't come back from an impeachment. You don't come back from January 6th. You don't come back from any of this. But he's come back. The guy's a survivor. And his opponent
is dead. What is he going to say? So Trump's a survivor and his opponent is what?
He's having so much trouble.
So much trouble.
That I would, at this point, give the edge to Trump.
He's so grumpy about it, too. It's unbelievable. He's got his hands in his pockets. He's like, he's probably wearing his sneakers like he always does. He's just like sad about it. He's like, I don't know how he survived an impeachment, all these indictments, everything. January 6th, he keeps on coming back. He's a survivor, he says. And that is true, man. The guy, sometimes I wonder if the left has made Trump better. You ever wonder that? Like, if Trump's policy positions, his fight is even better because they've spent so long trying to destroy him. He's just like, you know what? I'm going to be the exact opposite of what you want. You want globalism? I want nationalism. You want the borders open? I want the borders closed. You want to undermine our system? Rip apart what you refer to as our democracy? I'm going to fix it. I'm going to uphold it. I'm going to audit it. I'm going to make sure it's sound. You're going to screw with our military? I'm going to make our military stronger than ever. What if this is like a yin and yang situation? Trump needs them to be his best. He needs them to be utter demons so that he can fight them off. I don't know. Just a theory. Coming up, General Keith Kellogg joins us just minutes away. We'll talk to him about those demons because the left is now openly plotting a coup should Trump become commander-in-chief again. That's ahead.